Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, it's our pleasure to be showing the 1991 film from Hong Kong, Days of Being Wild, directed by Wong Kar-wai and starring Leslie Cheung. In fact, in 1997, this was voted by Hong Kong film critics as the best Hong Kong film of that decade. I think you'll see why as this film unfolds. It's the story of a narcissistic young man in search of love and identity, and needless to say, he gets mixed up with some criminal elements. We'll be talking about that and a host of other things pertaining to this film after today's screening. It's a pleasure to have back here on City Cinematheque Professor Xudong Zhang of New York University, a noted expert on contemporary Chinese film literature and culture. Now enter the wonderful, expressive, visual world of the cinema of Wong Kar-wai in Days of Being Wild. Welcome back from what I think is truly a haunting film. Few people who ever see this film ever forget it for a whole set of reasons. We probably can't address everything, but we'll touch on some of it in the next 30 minutes. And it's a pleasure to welcome back to City Cinematheque Xudong Zhang from New York University. Xudong is currently the chair of East Asian Studies there, and he's well known to readers about things Chinese for his numerous books and anthologies he's edited, with a special interest in contemporary culture, literature, and film. Actually, your next book, the one that's due out in 2008, is Post-Socialism and Cultural Politics, which is about the shape of Chinese arts practices in the 1990s. Welcome back, Xudong.
Good to be back, Jerry.
Let's start with a little bit of the historical background to this character of Yuddy in this film. This is a film set in 1961. That's a moment in Hong Kong very different from today. So how do we locate him? Who is he? What kind of Chinese is he, this young man in 1961?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, the director Wong Kar-wai moved to Hong Kong when he was 5 from Shanghai. So in a sense, Yuddy was somewhat like his own experience. And Yuddy, as we know from the film, he has a auntie, but actually his foster mother, who is a former courtesan and who speaks Shanghainese, Shanghai dialect. And that part alludes to this a modern Chinese history with this cutoff line or the threshold being 1949.
Right.
That before 1949, Shanghai was the prosperous commercial, economic, cultural center of modern China. After 49, the upper middle class, the educated class, not to mention the money moved, part of which moved to Hong Kong and settled down there. So Yuddy, in this sense, in this collective history, would be the second generation of migrants from mainland China, especially right. From Hong Kong, from Shanghai. So this Shanghai-Hong Kong connection will tell us a lot about modern Chinese history, especially a part of cultural memory and class identity intertwined with the revolution, but kind of squeezed by the communist revolution into the sort of a margin of history, and of course that history is defined in the Chinese context.
Right, absolutely. Let me just add one more factor to that. I think that helps us understand this. It's very late in the film that, of course, he goes to the Philippines in quest of his family. How does that? How do the Philippines fit into this historical pattern? Who's his family? I mean, by implication, when we see that big estate.
That's right. The family. I mean, just judging from looking at the film, you can tell the family has money and has this roots in mainland China, and has ties in America, because his stepmother was also talking to him about going to America. this transnational or even global connection is a feature of the Chinese bourgeoisie, so to speak, which is especially, whose presence is especially strong in Southeast Asia.
Right.
In places like Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, it's known that more than 80% of the national GDP is controlled by a tiny ethnic group of Chinese immigrants, representing sometimes 1% or 3% of general population, but they control the wealth. So this the sprawling estate in the Philippines and the hidden kind of mother, her viewpoint. All these alludes to this part of economic history, which is completely concealed from, explicitly, from the film, but visually, these are the images and allusions to this sort of hidden economic and political history.
Well, that brings us back to the character of Yuddy, in the sense that he's such a fascinating, character. It's one of Leslie Chung's great performances, but there could be a tendency to just, how to put this, to someone who doesn't know this background, to simply remove him and make him a narcissistic young man because, in a certain sense, he was just born that way. But in fact, the kind of background that you've given us makes him somebody who's shaped by history in very, very strong ways.
Oh, very much so, because I wouldn't necessarily say it's wrong to perceive this Yuddy character as a sort of a rebel without cause, right? And it certainly has its international appeal, because people in different parts of the world can be struck by the immediacy of this character, the raw energy, the rebelliousness, the carefree kind of spirit. He's the quintessential wanderer, rebel, bitter, but at the same time, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that he could be serious. That part comes toward the end of the film, when he has this conversation with his police friend, the former police, Andy Lau character. And when he talks about he wants to fly, he wants to become he keeps talking about a bird to the extent that the Andy Lau character becomes impatient. He's like, do you really think you're romantic? You can fly? You can show me how to fly. He said, one day I will show you. His bitterness, his rebelliousness, the film gives us a clue that is really rooted in his conflicted or even lost identity. Right. He's the one in search of his own identity. After all, he's someone who realizes that he's rejected by his own mother. Right. So this yearning to find a mother figure, a home, an anchor in life, these are not just random kind of moody things, but rather it's really deeply embedded in this personal history, which is an allegory of collective history.
I think that's a key statement, that this is a film, like all allegories, that allows this double reading. So if you want to, in a certain sense, glory in the performance, and just attach him to a kind of youthful male narcissism, that can be found in many, many cultures, the film will allow that. And certainly that, as you point out so well, is probably one of the reasons for the film's reception among several around the world. But in fact, the reason that this film has enormous resonance is because that it is an allegory of the collective experience, and this notion of a China that has gone through convulsive changes, sent millions of people into exile, or reconfigured their relationship with their own society, and so that everyone is in a quest for this self-redefinition, self-finding identity in those ways. And that brings up, I think it's also a very romantic film.
Oh, absolutely.
So that brings up this whole notion of him as a serial seducer and his relationships with women. What do you make of that, of his relationships with the women?
Yeah, that's the central part of the film in a sense, because the very first scene in the film is Yeti seducing this snapshot girl, but with a rather unusual technique, so to speak. He's playing with time.
Yeah.
So I'll give you 1 minute, and he basically forces this whole thing upon this simple girl. But later on, he explains his point. He says, if we look at the watch for 1 minute, it's part of the official history. It's no longer personal, because at this very moment, 1 minute before 3 p.m., April the 16th, 1960, nobody can change that anymore. So even though he's a player,
right,
but he's a player with a tragic sense of the absence of any meaning or permanence. Mm-hmm. And we have a sense that he's troubled by that. And that seems to be at least part of the reason he could be both so seductive and so cruel. Because later on, his girlfriends successively figure out he doesn't care about girls. Right. And there's even this comical competition between the Karina Lau character and the Maggie Cheung character. The Mimi or Lulu, she has different names in the film. She's the vulgar, kind of lively girl. She says, well, actually, even though we are both abandoned by him, I think he still loves me more because he left you for me, right? But the Maggie Cheung character replies also very smartly, says, well, for that matter, you should figure it out sooner than later. Whoever figures out first is in a better position, and I'm already over it, and you're still suffering. So, I mean, which means, but the women he seduces sooner or later figure that out. But the real tragic figure is still Yadi. That's the interesting part of this film, because he's the one who's haunted by this question, and he imposes this question on himself. He doesn't have to be that reflexive. He could just go on being a player, but he's really haunted by this question, which is extremely eloquently put by himself. He says, well, I know I would never know which woman I love the most before I reach the end, before I die. This, if we look at this in relation to that 1 minute setup, we see there's a pattern that even though he only lives the moment, and has no regret about that. At the same time, he would want to be able to put himself in this imagined position from which he could look at his life as a totality. So that's a narrative foreclosed. Even though his life is open-ended, is free, is just full of risk, it's an adventure. But nonetheless, it's an adventure with the ending in sight, and it's a self-imposed ending.
That's right.
So which we all know, the one-way literature is larger than life or better than life. At least, I mean, that's the view, the verdict passed to us as early as by Aristotle, is because the story has an ending.
Right.
So we can look this life, or I mean this episode of history as a totality. We know the beginning, we know the development, we know the end. Therefore, we know we can derive something from it, a moral, a meaning, a sense of permanence, and that's something Yadi is looking for, and that is something it seems to me that Wong Kar-wai, as a director, is searching for. It's by devising this story of very fragmented, alienated life, which gives it universal appeal.
Well, it also links him. I think you brought up this very interesting subject question of the relationship between this quest and time, and this links him to a whole set of particularly 20th century authors. Its tradition's much older than that, but novelists like William Faulkner and Marcel Proust, and earlier filmmakers who are truly time obsessed, like Alain Resnais or Nicholas Roeg,
Yeah.
in which this is not. Time here is not the stable linear thing
Not at all.
of the adventure films. Those may be great films, by the way, but it's not that concept of time at all. It has, as you've pointed out so well, it has to do with, on the one hand, microscopic time, almost down to how much meaning can be invested in 1 minute. Can we truly invest meaning in 1 minute? And then, as we've also discussed by implication, what's the meaning of the larger patterns, like history itself, that allows for the movements of people in these utterly chaotic ways? That's one of the ways in which the policeman character is so interesting, because he manages things in a very different way.
Yeah. He represents this sort of common sense, decent, ordinary sort of notion of everyday life in Hong Kong. That conversation toward the end is very interesting. He saves this yadi from the street of Chinatown when he's completely drunk. That alludes to another aspect of Hong Kong life as defined vis-a-vis mainland Chinese life after 49. Hong Kong after 49 becomes a sort of a refuge of all these who fled mainland China.
Absolutely.
Right? In a sense, it has this density of all the social structure, of all these everyday quotidian richness or messiness washed out of mainland China by communist takeover. So it's almost like a perfect lab of all these different competing forms of lives. You know, one way is, Hong Kong film makes that particularly prominent crime scene, the criminal life. But on the other hand, there's a tradition of solid middle class everyday life, which has its own form, its dignity, its moral codes. Everything communist China is not.
Right.
Yeah.
We see that, by the way, in a later picture like In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai, in which the domestic spaces are frequently, even when they're cramped, even when people are overcrowded, they're defined by a set of bourgeois rituals.
Absolutely.
Let's have our meal at this time. We retire to play cards, and everything is driven by that sense of bourgeois propriety, Chinese style.
Absolutely, absolutely. At the same time, if you look at mainland Chinese film, it's communal apartment buildings, class struggle, cultural revolution.
Absolutely.
So this opposition is also alluded to in Days of Being Wild, but later on, Wong Kar-wai would elaborate further, because also after the end of Cultural Revolution, after '89, throughout the '90s, it is the history on the margins which turns out to be the mainstream.
Right.
It's communist China which changed the course and wants to catch up with the global trend of middle class life or this or that. And it's interesting. First, Andy Lau character was a policeman, which was a highly respected job in Hong Kong, but he would want to become a sailor. That's why Yadi asked him, why would you want to become a sailor? He said he's also a wanderer.
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
also but a sailor, again, going back to this earlier topic on the hidden economic history.
Right.
A sailor, of course, is a reminder of Hong Kong's crucial, even central place in global trade and all these international ties through commerce, through economic export, import. So again, it's a reminder that the margin actually is more central.
Right. And this is very interesting because, of course, he's still alive at the end of the film, and one has the sense that the that Yuddy's quest is one that he is doomed to a kind of failure. We know that there is that. Whereas, the implication for the Andy Lau character is, well, he will go out and he will see the world, and he will either return to Hong Kong, as so many people who have done that, and turn that expertise into something in Hong Kong, or he will be in Los Angeles or London or Kenya or whatever, will be part of what you mentioned before, that a successful diasporic Chinese professional community.
Absolutely. Equally importantly, he will be the one who remembers. He remembers everything. Even though he somehow promises his dying friend that he won't say anything about it, because Yuddy, before he dies, he asks this policeman not to mention this to the girl. He said, "It better we don't say anything about it." Both turn out, both actually remember that 1 minute.
Right, that's right.
Or their encounter during the night, right?
Right.
But neither would want to admit it at the beginning. That's a very poignant moment. But he will go on living with this memory. So in that particular sense, Yuddy's failed, or his imagined flight cut short, he will continue this journey.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's this transference of mission in a certain way, and it's been, if I can say, it's been understood, but de-traumatized to some degree. I mean, it's not destructive for the Andy Lau character in the manner that it is with a kind of tragic inevitability for Yuddy. We don't have very much time left, so let's return to the Hong Kong aspects of this film. This is a very unusual visual portrait of Hong Kong. How does this strike you as different from what we see in so many of the Hong Kong films?
It's very striking because the film is jammed with all kinds of cinematic iconography of its own kind. Wong Kar-wai really has invented the series of Hong Kong iconography. Hong Kong in the film is not crowded. It's not this bustling commercial center, rather ghostly empty. The emptiness is so striking. There's no sense of society at all. All we see is a bunch of lone individuals, completely cut off from the rest of the society, from their own family, from their mother, from their loved ones. The policeman, the Andy Lau character, remains a police, even though he wants to be a sailor because his mother is sick. He has to stay behind to take care of it. But we have never seen we never get to see his mother. We do see he become eventually a sailor. And so it's a highly isolated picture.
Even the Maggie Cheung, he asked the Maggie Cheung character, well, don't you have anyone else to talk to?
Exactly.
And then she asks him, don't you get lonely out here doing this? And he actually says no, that he's somehow accepted the isolation and uses it for his own purposes.
And nobody calls anybody else.
Right.
The phone booth in the film is a reminder of separatedness, not connectedness, right? It stands there as a constant reminder of the separation of all these people who actually have affection to each other. They share something in common, but they cannot achieve this communication at all. And could I say something about the title?
Sure,
of the
please,
film?
please. And we'll probably have to wrap up there, but please do say so.
The English translation, which is very good, Days of Being Wild, really captures the spirit of the film, but the Chinese title is 阿飞正传, could literally be translated into a true story of a hooligan. Oh. 阿飞 is not, as far as I know, it's not necessarily a Cantonese word. It's imported from Shanghai. Okay. The hooligans, the wanderers, these troublemakers on the bund, in the foreign concessions, dandies, the prototypes of a lower class dandies. Street fighters, and things like that. Whereas 阿飞, these street slang for hooligan, is something like Little John in English, but the fei character means fly. And that goes very well with this recurring image of the bird without legs.
Okay, so we're going to have to end with that, but it's a very good place to end because it suggests what many people have noted, this incredible textural density of everything that Wong Kar-wai does. Yeah. If you'd like to know more about this series or about City University Television, please visit our website, www.cuny.tv. You'll find descriptions there of all the programming in addition to City Cinematheque, and also ways to communicate with us. Just click on by email. Xudong, always a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for bringing your expertise about so many facets of Chinese culture, and look forward to having you back again someday.
You're welcome. It's great to be back.
Super, super. And thank you for joining us today, and I hope you'll join us again as we stroll through the archives of film history. In any case, thanks for tuning in now.